I'd like you to meet Sheldon Greenberg. He's from California, San Francisco. He's a professor at the Academy of Art University, and he took his education at the California College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland, and he's a mixed media artist right now, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I started out my career many years ago in New York as an illustrator, and I illustrated for books, magazines, New York Times, a couple children's books, a lot of advertising work, and and then I moved back to California and went back to school, got my MFA in painting, and decided I didn't want to do illustration anymore. So I started searching galleries, and my style initially was very realistic, and I wanted to kind of move away from that. And so over the years, I've sort of gradually put it into what I'm calling sort of an abstracted realism, where I work with oil paints, acrylic paint, screen prints. I make screen prints that I use to put on the canvases. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I kind of have had a lot of different sort of subject matter that I like to use and techniques that I like to use. I find everything interesting, no matter what it is. And so I will just, I teach a lot of different classes. I teach a mixed media class. I teach a painting composition class. I've taught color and design. I've taught silkscreen, a senior painting class. And so what I was going to show this morning was I was going to share screen and just show you some of the things that I would be talking about with the class in general terms, things like that are really important no matter what medium you're using and what style you have, where it could be, we're just really considering, I'm always bringing up things about, value, color, saturation, composition is huge for me. And, putting all these things together, it's non-figurative or it's total abstraction, it doesn't really matter. But, and one of the things that I used for numerous years, I taught color and design for about 10 years. In this book, I don't know if you guys are familiar, Joseph Albers, really amazing artist and author, and really focused on using color theory and how colors can mix together and create interesting combinations with just different variations of the saturation and the value of these colors. And so this book is a really good book. I've had it for years. I always refer to it in terms of color interaction. And so if you don't mind, and please jump in if you have any questions. I'm going to share my screen.
Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when new Mastrius videos are added.
I'll show you some things that I talk about a lot. And you'll see the variations. So I'm going to start very beginning things that I deal with, and that is really focused on the idea of value and just the basics, right? So we go right from just black and white, and I do a lot of demos and all the stuff that I do, and then moving on to limited color palette. And really the focus I have with this is that, and I teach this a lot because it's really helpful for people that get caught up in too many color choices. What this palette is it's just black and white with yellow and terra rosa.
What is the color
and
used? Because
it's yellow ochre and terra rosa red. And what this does is, as you can see, when I've mixed these colors together, is I get basically an old master palette. We're going from the yellow, a little bit of orange to the red, and then moving into a darker variation of greens. And the idea of, using the values with black and white to create the variation. What happens here is, as you can see, this is my demo, one of my demos. Just taking this color palette really create a lot of interesting things with this idea of limiting your colors. And so that's something that I really emphasize a lot, because I think a lot of times people get too caught up in just throwing everything in the mix. And instead of doing that, really focusing on just limit the color and value. It's another example, just using that same color palette and, really understanding the values and the color choices. Another combination of those colors create this, three-dimensional realistic version of this cup and saucer and the pan. And as you can see, my paintings, initially I started out very realistic and very tight, and I've moved away from that, focused on seeing the brush strokes and getting a little bit looser with my paint strokes. This is an example of going from color and just using black and white on this cup, and then using yellow ochre to create a sense of color choices and variation with what's in the light versus what's in the shadow. And then this is the same example, again, with the same use of the limited color palette. This thing I will talk about a lot, in the beginning, for those of you that are, is the warm light, cool shadow. So basically, when we work inside, we're dealing with warm light, or if we're working outside, plein air, we're dealing with warm light as well. And so there's always going to be this idea of whatever's in the light should be a warmer color than what's in the shadow, which is color. That's an example of what I'm showing here, is how to manipulate the color choices as well as the value at the same time. And so I find that really very, very important. This is a really simple way to keep this in mind, is light value to dark value. You're going to deal with warm color to cool color. So if you think of those two things in tandem, it'll be really easy to put this together in practice. And then this is another example of the color wheel, just using an apple. And again, using the white, the terra rosa, and black, and then explaining, the warm light on this side of the apple and the cool color on the opposite side, okay? So then we get into this idea of, once we move from there, then going into full color. And the first thing I talk about a lot is this idea, again, of saturation. Saturation, when you have something that's very saturated, even though we're trying to depict a warm and cool side of the objects, we still need to keep the saturation up. And so that's really important in terms of the color theory idea, is how do you manipulate the colors but still have the value change that you want? And that's really something that I stress when we're dealing with realism and saturated imagery. And so these are examples of again, demos that I've done for the classes. This idea is, again, really good.
There we go.
There we go. Sorry about that. But anyway, so my point being with these is using, this idea of the cool light and how it affects the color of the object versus the idea of, the warm light and on this one, and how it affects the color and the saturation of that object. So that's that. And then going to, let's see, where did I go here? Okay, and then moving into the idea of, again, this concept of the warm light, cool shadow. So a really simple setup of just, these objects, saturated objects, and then a cup that is just a white cup, but we still have to depict it as a warm light and cool shadow to the value and range on those objects. The same thing with the other objects in that setup. And so those are some of the things that I would deal with, and just in terms of the simplicity. And then I wanted to show you, before I pull of the most recent works that I've done, but I've done some demos. I thought it'd be fun to show you the demos. So this demo is based on this. Oh, that's the photo. Wait, where's the actual photo? Where's the photo? Well, I'll show you the demo, and you can see what I'm talking about here. let's pop this up. Yeah. So now what I want to explain as I'm going to stop this periodically to show you what I'm talking about. But do is I initially start out. I always think about when I'm painting anything is the idea of big to small shapes. So big shapes first, and then work your way down to the deep. Even if it's abstraction, if it's realism, it doesn't matter. You just want to work with bigger shapes first, toward smaller shapes. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just blocking in the bigger pieces. And notice I'm just painting everything at the same time. So I don't focus on one thing too much. I just want to block in a key color. So a key color meaning, whatever that object is. So like the matchbox is a blue matchbox. So I'm just going to put in a key color of blue. And that's all I'm going to deal with. And then I move forward to the next object and next object. I don't want to get too caught up in anything specific too early. So I'm just kind of bouncing around, making sure that everything is getting painted. Now I'm painting on a white tabletop, but I'm not going to leave the tabletop white. I'm leaving that for last because it's the lightest value in the composition. And so that's why I want to leave that last. And as I get going, as you can see I'm adding more details and adding stuff that becomes smaller brushes, big to small kind of concept. And then this is the thing. So as you can see, I've added detail to every little thing. And the tabletop now has some variation of value and color. So I'm making it a little bit more interesting visual. And also too, something that I talk about is even if you're doing setup or, in realism, I've taught landscape, you don't always have every little thing. A lot of times it can be a color choice that you don't like. You use a color, or you can take something out. If there's a tree in your setup, you don't like that tree, you can take out that tree. And so my background was actually my studio wall, which is a mess. I'll show you. I wanted it a different color, so I just made it purple. A lot of times I'll use complementary color. Now this is another composition. This is the setup of the objects. Just some of my paint containers that I use to make screen prints. And then this is I'm sorry, this isn't big enough. What I'm doing here is I'm painting on a toned piece of paper. And the reason for toned paper is that you are value that's in the middle. So it makes it easy for you to adjust things. You can even use part of the painting instead of worrying about trying to paint out the white. So now I'm just drawing it up, keeping it very simple, not getting too specific, blocking in the key color again, and focusing on just the main shapes, starting to get a little bit more specific as I'm moving. And then, really focusing in on the value change, on the saturation of those objects. Thinking a little bit more about the background, because as you can see now, I've used background gray as just my choice. And then the finish for this one, where is the finish? Here's the finish. So I changed the colors a little bit. I wanted it a little bit more interesting. I kept the gray as the background, but I added the green at the base because I like the idea of it sort of bouncing off this red container. To complementary color can always be effective. And because I have yellow and violet, which is a complementary color, and I have orange and blue, which is complementary as well, it made sense to me to add that green. So I've got one more complement in there. And this, by the way, too, as you can see my notes, is whole thing not using black. I find that black can be a little bit not interesting. I guess would be the best. You can combine. This is a good example here. Is if you take like a red and a blue and green, because they're all dark value, and mix them together, you can get a really beautiful variation of a dark color and value. And notice what I did here is the light source is coming from the right, but I've made the background, this side of the painting is actually reading as a cooler color than the right side. So it's accentuating this idea of where the light source is coming from, okay? And so these kinds of things are just things that emphasize so that everyone can really kind of see, the variation and thought process that goes into this stuff when I'm, thinking about all these things. So I can show you, I'll show you what I've been working on lately. And I have this fascination with pattern, and I've used pattern for many, many years. And the patterns that I like are dots and stripes. And so I have been using dots and stripes as a pattern, kind of as a foil to the rest of the composition. And so all of these works that I'm working on right now are in nature and the environment. And so I'm using screen prints along with some other, images, the dots patterns, the the value range of shapes. I've got a lot of variation with composition. So I'm really thinking about, what is happening with, what's the focal point of my painting? Trying to figure out, what do I want to look at first? That's what I do when I start composing these things. And a lot of times the way I go up is an abstract way of painting where I'll just start adding color choices and I'll just start putting shapes on, and then eventually will block those out and come up with something that is making sense to me at some point. So this is a 50 by 80 painting, and how I started it out. And I also use a lot of, I call it this mute chart. Good morning.
Morning.
And so what I do is I use these bars again, this stripe method as a way to, you into the composition. I grew up in the Midwest, and so I've always been fascinated with palm trees. So I use a lot of palm trees in my work. I use a lot of layering, and something else that I find is really effective, and a lot of times it's something that I have to always bring up to everyone, is that we're constantly thinking about adding, right? So we're adding things to the composition. We're putting things in. We're configuring a really painting. But then it gets to a point where, and this is true with everything, realism, abstraction, it doesn't matter. At some point, you need to start taking things away. And how much can you take away and still have the essence of what you want in the painting without cluttering it up with too much stuff? And so the way that I go about this is love to throw in more things than I think I need. And then I'll start taking things out and just keep going back and forth to find the right combinations of. And so that's something that I find is really effective in terms of, this was a small series. Well, this is a 4 by 5 foot, but I did 4 of these where I was basically thinking swimming pool, but I was really playing with composition and the angles and the shapes and the dynamic of where you are in space. Because I find that the way that I like to work now is to not so realistic. I'm going to use realistic imagery. I'm going to mess up the sense of where you are in space. Are you on top? Are you underneath? Are you on the side? And I find that really fun to play with. And so I'm always thinking of contrast are really important. And so any kind of contrast that I can make, I will do. This is a 50 by 80 painting that I just got sold down in Santa Monica for a lobby space. I think it's a law firm. And this one was one of these things where I just kept adding things and then taking out and really around with the stripe idea. Usually we'll just do either one or the other. I use the stripes as pattern and I use the polka dots as pattern, but I very rarely will do them at the same time because it gets too much. I like the contrast again of things that are flat versus things that are really active. So active versus inactive space, I find is the most appealing. And so I really try to focus on that in my works. Let's see, I need to see if I can move this over. This is a more earlier of the works. This is 6 by 7 feet. And again, using this, what I'm calling the mute chart as the stripes, and then really creating a little bit more of a sense of a typical three-dimensional space. You know, the figure is in the foreground, the stripes is in the middle ground, and then the background you're looking at through a window of palm trees in the background. And so that's a pretty specific one. This one's a little bit older one as well, where I was playing again with this idea of stripes and thinking more of like a sunset at the beach and really.
Hanging up again. The second time. He's frozen again. How are you, Anna?
Good. How are you?
Good. Yeah. There we go.
Oh, there you are.
Sorry about that. Anyway, does anybody have any thoughts or questions about what I've said so far?
I'm curious about how you make those stripes. Do you paint them, or is it more like a collage?
Yeah, I go through a lot of tape. I buy tape at like the hardware store, and I use tons of old, like those really cheap plastic handled brushes. I 10 at a time. And you know, I just leave them just randomly in my palettes, and then they just sit there. They just sit there. I can show you. This is part of my studio. This is a section of my studio, and so these are the works I'm working. The ones on the wall are the ones I'm working on right now, and then the table there. That's where I use my screen prints. That's how I make my screen prints there, so it's the everything is painted. I mean, I use acrylic paint for most of these pieces. And the reason why I do that is because I love to paint in oil paint, but I can't. It's crazy to wait for dry 3 or 4 days. And I like to paint on 4 or 5 things at once. And so when I paint with acrylic, I find that I don't lose the spontaneity of the work. And sometimes when I'm working in oil paint, if I have to wait for it to dry and then I come back, 3 or 4 days later, and I just kind of feel like I lost the momentum a lot of times, and it can be super frustrating. So I really enjoyed the acrylic paint because I can put it down all the time. It dries fast. I can keep working and manipulating it, going back and forth, painting back in, screening on top of it, painting that out, and just really, it's a balancing act between what I am looking for and what I want. And a lot of times it will take some time to have that happen. And you have to let the painting tell you what to do. You can't just force it into something, because if you let the painting tell you, and maybe it wasn't what you thought you were going to do that day, but all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I'm going to do this because now I get it, right? It's making sense now. And so that's really one of the exciting things, is that when it get into that groove, then I can keep going. Where with the oil paint, it becomes very difficult because, like I said, sometimes I'll lose momentum. I don't have the feeling I had the day that I was working and I was really enjoying it. So I've found that I've been really gravitating a lot more lately to the acrylics, just because it's easier and I can do more with it, in a shorter amount of time. And so I really find that that's appealing for me. I'm going to share my screen again because I want to show you guys. I
I
just
have a
finished.
question for you.
Yes.
So all the figures or palm trees and things that we see in your work, they're screen printed?
And that's a great question. Where is that thing? The palm trees are screen printed because I realized that I was getting bogged down by painting them. And so I wanted to have a variation. So I have quite a few variations of palm tree screens that I will kind of transition. And then the other things that are screened are things that are just like objects and things. This is a show that I just finished last year that is based on my favorite works in art history over the years. And so I painted some imagery and I've kind of messed with them and put them in a new composition. So these are all large works. These are like 5 by 6 feet. This is a takeoff on a Caravaggio. This is all painted. The palm tree is screen print. Everything else is painted. And this was Jean-Léon Gérôme paint I really loved. And I wanted to do something with that. And so I got this gentleman. I love this. And so I used my mute in the hat and then screen printed the background and the palm trees in there. And let's see, this one I did as a takeoff on Manet, the Olympia, but I just painted just the bottom part of her figure and then using the stripes and really a composition, 2/3, 1/3, so 2/3 the stripes, 1/3 the negative space. What else? Olympica painting. I always loved her Art Deco style. And so I combined her with, again, this is a screen print. Everything else is my painting. Changed her face. The girl that was actually in the painting, I didn't like her face color, so I made a different head for her. And put a little drawing of Betty Boop down there. Again, these are all the same size, big. This one, I've always loved Morandi because when I was teaching a still life class and a lot of my students didn't know Morandi, and I just loved Morandi. And so I used the idea of the mute chart with his of colors, and then I did a study of one of his simple still lifes that I found really fascinating. This one was smaller. This is a 35-inch square. This painting I loved. It's based on this Watteau of he was a comedian, a French comedian. And again, painting everything except the palm trees on the right, and then using the mute chart as his sort of stage, and then Betty Boop again, and a little, that Coco figure, cartoon figure on his sweatshirt. This was a big painting too, in real life, a major work of art that I've always really liked. What else? I could show you this one, so I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Vermeer. And so I painted everything. The silk screen of this figure is silk screen, and then everything else is painted. This is actually a mixture of oil and acrylic paint. And again, you can see how I'm really playing with, taking out, putting in, really adjusting for, what do I find is the most interesting thing, and what's working for composition and not. So again, I really enjoy doing some of these figures. This was and it's this boy that is watching. He spun a top on his table, and I the top out and painted him and added the little Minnie Mouse screen print in the background, and then again my little striped mute chart thing at the bottom of his tabletop. So, again, just kind of playing with images that I've always loved, but then really understanding what it is about that any particular painting, what was the most important part for me that I wanted to depict. And so that was a really fun exercise, and a very trying exercise, because some of the works that I paint are really hard to paint, but I enjoyed the process. And it's interesting how that can, if you probably have seen people that set up in a museum and they'll paint, from the paintings in the museum. And it's a really good exercise because you really need to understand, the colors that these artists were making, these famous artists, and how they put together the colors and the compositions to make them really well. But so that's always something interesting to do as well. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know. Is there anything else I can talk about or show you all, or any questions?
So for your mentorship group, so what are you going to be focusing on to start with?
Good question. So I would focus on whatever it is that you're working. That would be something that I focus on. With my students the classes that I have taught and are teaching, it's a specific thing. So this is different. This is really about what you want out of your work and how can I help you get there. That's really what it's about for me. And the idea of taking something that maybe I hadn't thought of and really exploring it with you and getting that excitement out of what it is you're doing and helping that process along, I find will be really gratifying for me because it's something that I love to do anyway. I really enjoy helping students get to where they need to get. And
Gee, it happens again. You must have some issues with power over there in California. This is the third time. Yeah. Yeah. I like his style, like it's really different from
sorry
art.
about that.
Yeah, it's
I'm
really
so sorry.
exciting what you do.
apologize.
We were just talking about your style and it's really exciting what you do.
Yeah, it's
Thank
so,
you very much. Get that.
but I just asking this question. Like representational painters, artists would benefit as much as abstract artists from your master's.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, because I've done it all. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of amazing. I don't really think about that, but when I was putting together, something that I would, talk about and how I could engage varying types of artists in different styles, and I realized, wow, I've really covered a lot of ground. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I like it all. That's the interesting thing is I really enjoy any kind of art. I mean, I do a lot of drawing if I'm not in my studio. My house is about 10 minutes away, but if I'm not here in the studio, I'll just have a couple drawing books at my house and I'll just play with that. And I find that to be really gratifying. And a lot of times when I do drawings, some of the drawings get incorporated into screen prints, and then I'll use that for the works that I would never have thought to do. But I think what happens is, and this is what I love about drawing, is that you're kind of unconscious a little bit. It's not like you're focusing too much on one thing. You're just kind of playing. At least that's the way I look at drawing. And a lot of times when you're doing drawings, you might do something that you never had thought of before. And so that I find something that I really like because it kind of just takes me out of the realm of thinking I was going to do a specific thing.
That's right.
Do you make your own screens or do you have someone that makes them for you?
What I do is, I mean, technically I will, shoot photographs and then I'll manipulate them on my computer. I'll make a halftone and then I send them out to this place in San Francisco that will burn the screens for me. And then they ship them back to me. So that's easy. But when I teach the silkscreen class, I just will do my own. I'll do them all from start to finish on my own because I have all of the stuff there where I don't have the ability to burn the screens here in my studio. So I send them out to get burned and then they send them back to me. Yeah. But it's fun to me to, this is something that someone had mentioned to me just recently because of the imagery that I had done in those master copies was this idea of, aren't you worried about, copying someone else? But, this is something that I talk about with my students forever is that, as long as you change it to make it your own, you're not copying it. And that's the key. You can take any visual these days, off the internet, off the gallery or whatever, as long as you're putting it into your own realm, you're good to go. Right? That's key because, now we have so much access to every little thing. I mean, it's amazing. We can just always find reference anywhere, everywhere. It's just constantly out there all over the place, right? And so it's we can pick and choose and find what we like and make it our own.
I think you're muted, Ghislaine.
Yeah, I'm muted. What will you focus on in the first session or the first couple?
Probably something really simple. Something very, very, very simple. In one of my classes, in one of my classes, I have people get a book, go to a used bookstore and just get a book for a buck or something. And then take that book and use it to do just something random in the book. You could cut up pages. I have so this is a book that I found. It's huge. It's a big one. And I put a silk screen thing on the front and a silk screen thing on the back, so you don't know what it is. But what I do is I use this as a way to create things. I'll cut shapes out. I'll just randomly, start painting things. I'll do drawings of figures in there. I'll glue stuff down. I had one of my classes, we had a lot of models. And so I was using the pages to draw the models. And these were like 2-minute quick studies. But I love the idea of having the top be sort of a texture of the background. And I really like that concept. So maybe something as simple as that, as the first session, or actually just, even just exploring what everyone's doing. And then, getting some interaction feedback. Because to me, I think the best case scenario is you don't want to just listen to me talk all the time. I want everyone engaged. I want people's opinions. When I was in grad school, my instructors were really like hardcore about, everybody needs to be involved, not just the teacher. And I really like that idea, because you get really good from your peers as well as the instructor. So that'd be something I might be thinking about in the first one. Yeah.
Your
I mean, I want to keep it.
Sorry, your picture is
What?
very pixelated, so we couldn't see
Ooh.
the book very well. So yeah, it's yeah.
I apologize for that. I have never had a problem with this internet right before. I don't know what's happening, but it says I've got everything, all the bars and everything. I don't know. Anyway,
right, Anna, and is it for you pixelated too?
Yeah, it's a
No.
little pixelated. Maybe you have some other things that are open on the background, like all the images you had. Make it
no,
a
I
little...
pulled everything down.
Okay.
Everything is off and in a folder. I know that there's, when you have too many things up, you have to shut it off so it doesn't affect the rest of the. I know.
It's better
Anyway,
now.
yeah. Any
Cool.
other?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Anybody has any more questions? And
Yeah, anything else you want to know?
can you show the book again, because your picture is better now? So
Shoot. Yeah. So this, like I said, I just got this at a used bookstore. Can you guys see?
yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so I was just, I'm just playing, I'm just drawing. I'm not thinking too much. I just want to, like, this page was just cut up other pieces of paper and making a composition out of that. I was using tape. One day I thought it would be really cool to think of tape as a line. And so I was using tape to create a composition with line, and then with the color, I was using colored pencils.
Mhm.
So it kind of, what I love about this idea is it's so free form. You can just do whatever you want to do because it doesn't matter. I think that's the key to this sometimes, is like not caring Here's more tape. This is a tape composition with a pattern, a screen pattern, blue acrylic, and then I tape on top of it to create a composition. So this is like, to me, just the, no holes barred. You can do anything you want on the pages, and to me that can be really exciting. A couple of these, so I would randomly think of certain words, and then that became the composition. I would make the words stand out over the rest of the page. This is a really beautiful pattern that I found at this Japanese paper shop, and I bought a bunch of papers, and then I have this stamp of a palm tree that I used to create this. Some of them don't make any sense at all. Some do. This is a screen print. Another screen print. I just repeated. For the longest time, I was using repetition. Years ago, I was thinking that I wanted to be a video artist, and I realized that I was not very good at it. I was terrible. So I decided, well, how can I make my paintings read like a video? And so I started repeating things, and I would repeat the same image at least 3 times. I have a huge thing about odd numbers. I find that odd numbers are way more interesting than even numbers. And so I would repeat shapes and paint them, but I got really frustrated that every time I painted it, it didn't look like the first one. But then I realized that's okay, because that's what a movie still is. It's not the same every single frame. And so then I started really getting into the idea of repeating these shapes. And I still use some repetition in the paintings now. And I find that there's something really interesting about a repeated visual, because when you look at a painting that has a repetition of some kind in it, your eye kind of wants to bounce around and look for what's different. It's interesting because our brains want to connect everything together, but we also are not sure if it's the same thing exactly. So we always want to look at it and see, okay, is that the same as that one? Is that the same as that one? And so what happens then is when I do the screen prints, if I repeat the visual, because of the way the buildup of the paint on the screen, the visual changes as I'm manipulating it, which I find interesting, because then it's not the same every single time. So again, variation is a big thing for me. Contrast, contrast of texture versus smooth, contrast of saturation versus desaturation, contrast of black and white versus color. All these things to me are really intriguing and interesting, just constantly fascinating.
I have to go, Sheldon. So
Okay.
Anna will take over
Okay.
for right now. So she's also a navigator. So
Okay.
I'll see you soon. Yeah, thank you.
Anything else you want to know? Are you Anna, you got any thoughts about anything? Like what do you do? What's your favorite work? Like,
I do mixed media acrylics as well, and
Nice.
I'm like, when I saw your work, I thought it was really dynamic and exciting kind of stuff. I do also take lots of photographs that I'm thinking of starting to integrate in my work, and go from there. Yeah, so like, just with the composition and like, when I look at your work, I see the cohesiveness in the patterns and like that kind of stuff. Yeah, so like, just working on that, and how do you define what your signature patterns or color or like that kind of stuff are, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I talk about in the mixed media class a lot. And you mentioned using photographs. One thing that I show the students how to do, I don't know if you know how to do photo transfer.
Yeah.
With Pro? Yeah, you do? Okay. Yeah, because that's kind of an easy way to create a visual and repetition with a photo transfer. And also it kind of does the same thing my screen prints do, where if it's not going to be perfect every time, right? Which I find really interesting and fun. In terms of pattern and colors, I kind of honed in on my concept of stripes and polka dots many, many years ago. It was just a thing that I really gravitated towards immediately. And I think that's really important, to kind of pay attention, listen to yourself, what is it that I like about, is there a pattern that I find that I gravitate towards, even if you just open up your wardrobe, okay, how many patterns do I have in my shirt, drawer, or whatever. And then how many colors do I have? I have very few colors in my closet. I have a lot of white, a lot of black, and a lot of pattern. And I started doing demos for the class years ago. And the first one I did, and they told me to come in, you can't use, don't have any pattern, don't wear pattern, don't wear white, don't wear black. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to go buy a new shirt because I don't have anything to wear. But yeah, that's kind of something that I would, look into is, kind of what do you normally, what's something that you gravitate towards? Even trying, like I kind of decided years ago to limit my colors and focus on just a really simplified color scheme and see how far I could take that. And I ended up finding myself, and I'm still doing that after, I don't know, 5 years or something, that I really gravitate towards secondary color, so orange, violet, and greens. And those to me are really just do everything that I want them to do. Even when we mix them together, we get some really beautiful mutes and some tints and tones and shades. And I find that those colors really work for me. Now that one is something that took me a while to figure that one out, actually. Yeah. But it was kind of trial and error. It was like, okay, let's see. I keep doing this. Let's try this. I find that I used to never like to use the color green. And landscape painting was never that interesting for me because of the green. I love painting like, cityscapes and stuff because there's not much green. But then I've started gravitating towards green, and I really found now that what I'm doing, actually the way that I use green now is I mix, it's not actually a green, it's a green color, but it's phthalo green, so it's a really saturated green. And then I mix that with a gray that I use. I use golden paints. I don't know if you're familiar. Do you use goldens? Yeah, I love those paints. And so I would mix that with the gray. It's a number 8 gray. It's a really beautiful gray, and I mix that in with the green, and you get this just gorgeous color. As a matter of fact, something else that I was showing people that I've gotten into is these things. It's a kind of have you ever seen these? The open acrylics?
Yeah.
So these are kind of cool because they're kind of like oil paint, right? They stay wet longer,
A
so you
little longer.
blend better and do those kinds of things. And so for the students that were a little bit scared to paint in oil paint, I'd have them use these, and then they're like, "Oh, that's cool. I like that." Yeah.
Very cool. All right. I don't know. I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
I hope you get some people for your group.
Yeah, thank you. Lorraine, any questions from you?
No.
No?
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, I guess we're done then.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I'll ask you one more question. Do you teach online as well, or no? You teach in-person workshops?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I've been teaching online for 12 years. And I also, during the pandemic, I was doing Zoom classes. There was no classes, and so I can, do 2 cameras and do a demo, and you can see what I'm up to. And then, I have both things happening. So it works well. I find that I really, I love the interaction, with the other artists, the other students. And so that's been something that, even though I prefer to be in class, you know, the Zoom is really, thank God, it's actually, you know, it's a blessing in a lot of ways, you know, because we still get that interaction. And even my online classes, I do audio. I'm a really terrible typer, so I will just put audio for the critiques, and the students love that. They always comment at the end of the semester, wow, I wish more of my professors would do the audio, because they love to hear my voice. You know, it just gives us makes it feel a little bit better connection.
Very cool. All right. Nice meeting you.
Yes, you too. Have a nice day.
All right. Yeah, you too. Bye.